Hey everybody, welcome back. We're the Benchwarmers, your bi-weekly-ish look at the world of Jews and sports. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my friend Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
I'm okay. A big shlicha for missing last week. That's my fault.
Yeah, I think regular listeners know that our schedules sometimes get a little
Yeah.
confused in the summertime, and the doldrums of the sports calendar.
We're
There's not necessarily so much to talk
we're
about.
fresh parents, and having a
Yeah,
child in
that too.
daycare means that sickness is just sort of a way of life. There's as the world turns and the sun goes up and down, as do the colds and the flus and the strep's throat.
Sure.
That happens all the time. So I was sick. I was too sick to record. So we decided to punt last week's episode. And now,
Or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, last, Times episode. Now we've got a lot of stuff to catch up on. There's been
just on the strep throat issue. I've never been diagnosed with strep throat or bronchitis or any other cold like that would require antibiotics. Do you think this is either A, impressive, or B, just a sign that I don't go to the doctor enough?
probably,
Like, which of those two things? Because
though, having strep throat, I remember having it as a kid, not being so bad, but like it's the worst pain I've had in a very long time. Like it is.
Okay, then I think I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think I've actually had.
You would need to go to the doctor. Like it's pretty overwhelming.
Good to know. Well, glad you're doing better.
Thank you.
It is the off season for all sports, all professional North American sports, I should say, except for baseball.
But
and there's not a lot of news in that regard. It's just sort of like the Jews are playing baseball, and some of them are doing it better than others. Our Toronto Blue Jays hosted Jock Peterson and Gabe Kapler last week, and the San Francisco Giants, but didn't have such a great series there. But there's been some interesting both international stuff and off-season stuff that we should talk about. The biggest one that I want to mention off the bat is Israel's tremendous accomplishment at the under-21 European
spectacular.
Championship. Now we just talked last episode about the Youth World Cup, like the under-21 World Cup that was going on. Israel ended up making it to the semifinals, where they ultimately lost, but it was this great result. Really Israel's best result ever at a World Cup type event. It's the under-21 team. But now they've been playing the under-21 European Championship in Georgia, the country, and this is for qualifying for the Olympics, because the Olympics is played by I think it's under-23 teams. So it's like your U21 team qualifies, and then the following year, they're still all eligible as U23 levels. And I think there's you might be allowed a few older guys, but Israel has now made it into the semifinals there. As of this recording, there's no result yet, but they beat Georgia, who's the host team. And also because of, whatever machinations of international football, like France and England have also made it to the semifinals. And since they can't qualify for the Olympics through this tournament, Israel has now guaranteed a spot in the Olympics.
Oh, that's pretty exciting.
So the reason is because the Olympics in 2024, we should say, are in Paris, presuming that the city still exists and hasn't burned down, and there aren't ongoing riots stopping the Olympics from happening. The Olympics will be there. So France has an automatic bid.
Yep.
England, I believe, because it qualifies for the Olympics and international soccer differently. Like England doesn't represent there's no English team at the Olympics, right? It's Great Britain. But there's no Great British soccer team. Like there's no Great British football team. England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, each have their own, probably like Gibraltar, like all the Channel Islands, they each have their own national team, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, England couldn't qualify this way. So Israel has made it into the semifinals. They'll be playing England, and obviously victory at the tournament would be really important. But I think the cooler thing is just that they're going to the Olympics. This is going to be the first time since 1976 that Israel has made it to the Olympics for soccer. So that's, be really interesting to see.
That's
how they can do.
That's extremely cool. And, Israel just coming off their excellent under-21 World Cup championship. We're talking losing in the semifinals. We're talking about, the Olympics is an under-23 tournament. Overall, they have a really good, really, likely a chance of appearing, actually making some noise given how well they did in the last tournament, because it's a lot of the same teams they were facing this year,
Yeah,
sort
exactly.
of a redo of that tournament next year.
Yeah, and it seems like it's guys who are playing together. We should say, obviously our podcast is focused on Jews and sports. It is it's a mixed team. It's a mixed Arab and Israeli team. Sorry, and there's I think a few Druze players as well, but lots of Jews on the team, obviously. And I think a team that Israel is going to have a lot of fun cheering on next year. I did doing some research on this. So as I mentioned, Israel made the Olympics twice before. One in 1976, when I believe that they drew 3 games and then lost to Brazil in a quarterfinal. So decent result. But the 68 one has a very interesting outcome from that. So they won 2 of their games in the qualifying round, made it to the quarterfinals where they played Bulgaria, and they tied Bulgaria 1-1. And the not unlike selecting a day for the genocide of Jews in the Book of Esther.
Oh boy.
The decision on which team made it forward into the semifinals was done by a drawing of lots. And apparently,
it's not.
Yeah,
it's certainly biblical standing when you call it the drawing of lots.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it was a Summer Olympics. Because it was in Mexico. It was later in the year. It wasn't in around Purim time, but because they tied in the quarterfinals, that's what was done back then. And apparently, this was common in like international soccer tournaments up until this time. That it wasn't even like, like it wasn't, now we do like a overtime or extra time and penalty kicks, but it wasn't even like, yeah, we're going to look at your goals for versus goals scored against you, goals against in the round robin. It was like, no, we're just they literally picked a name out of a sombrero from what I read. And so here's the interesting. So
the drawing of lots.
That's annoying. Yeah, and so obviously that's like not the way you want to do it in terms of just having a system in place for doing it. But the Israel Soccer Federation helped contribute to change the rule. They basically wrote to FIFA saying like, we got to stop doing this. And I'm referencing here, I should mention a shout out because it's a very informative article here. Haaretz article by Uzi Dan, dated November 22, 2017. And he talked about how Israel basically wrote to FIFA and said, we got to stop doing this. Like, we got to find a better way of doing things. And shortly afterwards is when they introduced the, system that we have now of extra time and eventually penalty shots. So, still a problem, I would say. Like, do you feel like international soccer tournaments have like resolved the tie issue? I feel like it so often just comes down to penalty shots, which are, not quite as random as a drawing of lots, but not so much better.
No, I mean, in a way, they sort of are the drawing of lots, but they actually have to happen. I think I don't mind it because I think it's part of the game. Soccer is such I don't want to say slow moving, but it's such a war of attrition that after 90 minutes, after 120 minutes, in the sense, like you have to have a resolution. It's so hard on the body and so difficult. You can't really play these guys until they drop. So there's got to be some sort of finality to it. Personally, I kind of like the drama of it because, when there's penalty kicks on, just from like a sports fan perspective, like every eye in the room is on that TV and every, breath in the arena is held. As they said, as it says, for every fan in that arena, they paid for the whole seat, but they're only using the edge. That's what a live shootout is like in hockey and in soccer. And like, maybe it isn't necessarily in the traditional spirit of we play until there's a winner, period, the end. But I think in terms of a sports product, it's good. Like, there is no championship that is won without an incredible amount of luck, whether it comes to injury or, draw, or even just like the way the ball bounces. So as that continues to happen, I think that bringing a little bit into the game a little more nakedly is not necessarily a problem.
Well, I guess we have Israelis to thank for it, at least in part. That was Michael Almog who later became the head of the Israel Football Federation. I'm sure that wasn't what it was actually called, but that's close enough. Anyway, so that is very exciting. I think that is something to look forward to. We should say Olympics about a year away. As we get closer to it, I'm sure we'll do plenty of focus on both the Israeli team and also Jews competing for other countries around the world. If anyone has any insight into Jews qualifying for the Olympics in various ways, let us know. We're happy to feature people. We love talking to athletes from different sports. Before the previous Olympics, we had a fencer on who
Eli
was representing
Schenkel.
Team Canada. Schenkel, was that his last name? I don't think that's right. But anyways, he was a great guest and really interesting to hear about fencing from his perspective and what it
great, wonderful hair on that man. Eli Schenkel is his name. Guy. Yes.
Schenkel. Okay, that was the last
yes.
name. Right. Anyway, so keep us in mind if you hear about Jewish Olympians. Obviously, that's something we're going to focus on in the next year. Qualifying, starts to happen in all kinds of ways. We should mention as well, in terms of international Israeli sporting exploits, they competed in the World Lacrosse tournament and had a pretty decent outcome.
I want to talk about this. This is great segue. Sure. So, if you were to expect a team of Jewish Americans playing under the Israeli flag in global lacrosse, what do you guess their world ranking is?
Well, I think of lacrosse as being played mostly by Canadians, Americans, Indigenous people in both Canada and the U.S. Who have their own national teams, and that being pretty much it. But so I would think a Jewish team of American Jews being pretty decent, like in top 25 in the world.
So they're 7th, believe it or not. They've been ranked 7th in the world, number 2 in Europe, behind England.
Wow.
And they finished in 7th at the World Cup that just ended. Team made up mostly of American and Canadian Jews.
Okay.
So they actually finished the tournament 6-1. They won their pool, going 4-0, won the first elimination game, then got, absolutely bodied by the United States, losing 19-3 in the quarterfinals.
Right.
They then won their 7th place game, beating Jamaica. But Israel sort of played, I would say, to their ranking. They had a pretty high, they had a positive goal differential, above Jamaica on one side of them, and significantly better than England, who wound up coming in 6th, just because of the, the intricacies or the game that England happened to win in order to get into that 5th place game.
Okay.
So Israel, is the 8th seed in the playoffs, the worst of they had I think the lowest goal differential of all the pool winners, but they were undefeated in the pool, in their pool, won their pool, and made it, actually had a better goal differential than Canada in the first, in the playoff season, in the first round. The United States won gold, Canada won silver, and the Iroquois Nation, who put a team,
tend to be the dominant ones.
Yeah,
I think that was the outcome. So they did have. I'm trying to remember when it was, because I can't remember if we talked about it or not. It might have been before we had a podcast, but they did have a World Lacrosse Championship in Israel.
It was the last one.
I think
it was the
previous one, right?
It was in San Diego this year, and then it was postponed due to COVID. And 5 years ago, it was in Israel in 2018. Right. Israel was the host team, also came in 7th in Netanya, sort of games, in a field in Netanya Stadium, which is, it hosts a lot of tournaments. It's the national stadium of the Israeli national soccer team.
I'd be curious to know what the turnout was for any of those games, besides from like the friends and family members of the guys competing. But that's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's I don't know. Lacrosse is a great sport. Obviously, it doesn't have the sort of I know there is a pro league, but I don't know. It doesn't exactly have the sort of draw that other sports have. But it's nice to see Israelis playing. I assume like baseball, that there's some trickle down of lacrosse moving into Israeli culture by virtue of being around and stuff like that. I think so.
It's got a huge college culture in North America.
Right.
College lacrosse is a really, really serious sport, especially as they're trying to grow it all over the world. As a lot of most of the team was Israelis and Canadians, I should say, most of them, that doesn't include Israeli nationals Ori Bar David or Dolev Geva. Like those guys. So
there's some guys.
Yeah, those guys are Israeli. There is a team. There's a sort of a nationally level team an Israeli Premier Lacrosse League. They have games in Netanya. The Netanya team, which hosted the tournament, has sort of a big youth program, which has graduated a bunch of guys to the national team.
That's great.
Something interesting about Dolev Geva is he actually got a small waiver from the Israeli army where he currently is serving, from the Tzahal to go participate in the tournament.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, so there's a lot of support and sort of excitement to it. And their coach,
I think it's also a great avenue for any lax, Division I lax guy who doesn't want to go on to his I'm going to say internship at an investment bank. I think it was probably being the that's the conduit, and it's you want to spend a few years just playing lacrosse in Israel and probably having a pretty decent life, generally speaking, having a chill time. I would think
totally
that sounds great.
Totally.
So,
one other thing that's pretty cool, if we're talking about what is our North American, our as you said, their investment bank term. A lot of the players, the team fundraised their own way to the tournament. They had to raise about $50,000 on GoFundMe or Give Lively or whichever one it did. And they made the team. They were able to travel to Israel for training camp, and across America for training camp, and then to San Diego finally to put them up for the whole team. Even though there are a lot of Americans, they were able to get everyone across, which is extremely cool. A lot of these guys have played for Israel in a couple of years, but are, like every Israeli national team, it's somewhat of a motley crew of folks that have this connection. People who are raised Jewish, and then, you can embrace each other as being part of it. And something interesting about the team is a lot of the players have been talking very outwardly about what it means to represent Israel as much as it is the country, but as a team for Jewish people. Which is very, very cool.
Yeah, that's great. Moving on to a little bit of news from the tennis world, we should say that it's Wimbledon going on right now. There's a few
Wimbledon.
Yeah, Diego Schwartzman has been having a tough year.
Tough year.
I think
tough year for Diego.
Tough time in France. He's really been our great Jewish hope, and he's into the second round. He is going to be playing Jannik Sinner, the Italian tennis player, in the second round. Denis Shapovalov, born in Israel, not exactly identifying as Jewish, but Jewish mother. I think he had his first round game suspended, his first round match suspended, yes. So he'll finish up that. Probably beat the qualifier that he's playing. And Aslan Karatsev, the Russian-Israeli. Or not Russian. No, you can't call a tennis player Russian anymore. So the I don't know, the of unknown origin Aslan Karatsev is on to the second round as well.
Yes,
but he's going to be playing the equally countryless Andrei Rublev.
Yes,
who's a top 10 player. So that'll probably be it.
Actually, has been Andrei Rublev is his doubles partner.
That's
so right. From I guess the term is I think it's the international athletes or something. Is a countryless athlete. They tend to play under the IOC flag, like the Olympic flag, when they participate in a lot of sort of global tournaments. So it's a very weird thing that only exists in sports where I don't know, the reality of life stops being there for a while because of political machinations, Macedonia being called former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia at Olympic Games because otherwise Greece wouldn't show up, or totally
or Chinese Taipei, Chinese Taipei, the Taiwanese teams continue to be under that flag, or pretending that there's a unified Korea, a lot of weird things that only exist. So in men's tennis and women's tennis, Russia just doesn't exist. These people are from a country. Who can say which one? Certainly not Belarus.
Right, exactly. It goes the same. There's a lot of situations like this all over the world, and I guess there's a Western Sahara team that the same way people don't want to play with Israel against Israel. I'm sure right. Morocco doesn't recognize a Western Sahara separatist soccer team. If and when it would ever happen. So, these things come back over and over and over again. Obviously, it happens to Israel perhaps a little more than you would think. But it happens all over the world. And currently, that's, the solution for guys like Aslan Karatsev is they take it away. So they move it over. I'm seeing Shapovalov's match was suspended 2-2 in the second set. So
probably continue on tomorrow morning
against Meme Lord Radu Albot. And he's a big internet Reddit guy. Radu is.
Yeah.
But Shapovalov sort of spoke to the media about some gamesmanship from Radu, where Radu was sort of trying to psych him out, running back and forth on his return position.
Chapo always good for a quote.
Yeah,
he seems like he's a good guy to get. Yeah,
absolutely, always good for a quote.
On the women's side, we have Camila Giorgi. Sorry for dropping something. Camila Giorgi, who hasn't played her first round game yet, first round match yet, and Elena Svitolina, who has unconfirmed Jewish ancestry. We need to get to the bottom of that. Who beat Venus Williams in the first round? They were both wildcard qualifiers because Svitolina lost her exemption.
Status?
I don't know the rules. Yeah. Her status. I don't really know the machinations of WTA rules because she had a baby. She had a baby like I don't know 9 months ago or something like that. And Venus Williams, I think, has just had injuries and things like that it have stopped her from being able to play. And I gotta say, like, without knowing all the machinations of this, I think it should be like golf style, where it's like if you have won this tournament in collective memory, and you're still able to like get up and down the court, just let them play.
Yeah,
like,
you're back
it's silly
forever.
that someone like Venus Williams should have to like qualify or something like that, or whatever. Like get in through wild card.
Totally.
Again, I'm not speaking to this as a tennis expert. I just feel like if someone shows up and they're like, yeah, whatever, I'm Martina Navratilova, I will be playing Wimbledon this year, they should just be like, all right, whatever.
I think
your funeral, that's fine. Like if maybe that's a bridge too far, but say like under 50, or if you've won the tournament in the last 15 years or something like that, just like let them play. Who cares? What's the downside? Like it's only good for ratings or whatever else, like for Venus Williams to like be having a first round match against, another former top 10 player. Like there's no downside to that. I don't think
we should bring back a tennis expert, but I think the argument is that it's just not very good television. Like it's not going to be a competitive match. Is that because it's one-on-one? They don't want, in golf at least, like somebody can hide and miss the cut and you'll never hear from them again. But in tennis, like they're going to get embarrassed by somebody who's at the top of their game.
I think that's fine. I think that's like these people are competitive, and occasionally you would have some like 45-year-old guy, playing in his last U.S. Open eligibility or whatever because he won it 14 years ago. And you'd see him like make it to the third round, and it would be amazing. I mean, there's nothing like Tiger winning the Masters in 2019 or Phil at the PGA. Like it was amazing to see an old guy do something like that. So I agree, tennis is a younger person's game in many ways, but still, I'd like to see it.
You'd want to see something amazing happen where it's not, it's not likely. But as you said, it's also it might never happen. I guess he kept going for a very long time. I think he had a pretty magnificent run at age 38. Not likely to happen, but those sorts of things can happen for former champions. I see your point.
Yeah.
In the meantime, should we take a short break and then come back and wrap up the month in sports?
Sounds good.
Well, it's July, and you know what that means.
It's 1,000,000 degrees outside.
Yes.
There's wildfires burning everywhere. Yeah, I just got back from a trip and our air conditioning was off, and I am I run hot. Let's just put it that way. And it's way too hot outside. But what else does it mean? What else does July mean?
What else does it mean? It means it is the Tour de France going on right now, which means there's roughly 100 absolute machines of humanity. Racing 21 out of 23 days, hundreds of kilometers a day, going a total of 3,500 kilometers, going absolutely driving, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. Probably one of the hardest events on Earth ever. I don't think this is necessarily related, but no Jew has ever completed the Tour de France. We're not sure if any Jew has ever even attempted the Tour de France officially. But there's a number of really wonderful Jewish connections to it, both positive and negative, to cycling and Judaism, going all the way back to the Tour de France's origins.
Okay.
I'm excited to tell you guys about this. A lot of our research. There's a lot of sources on this, but one of the sources we consulted comes from a former guest and friend of the pod, Nathan Abrams, who wrote sort of a Jewish history of the Tour de France in Forward a few years ago. Generally speaking, the Tour de France exists because it was a marketing tool invented to promote an anti-Semitic newspaper that was created to publish anti-Dreyfus takes during the Dreyfus affair in Paris. It was a idea of the marketing arm of this newspaper to create a bike race with ads everywhere for this newspaper to rile up support against the Jews in, during the time of the Dreyfus affair. So the history is somewhat Jewish, at least in that aspect. There's also, a lot
Jewish,
of
the anti-Semitic history, the anti-Semitic history of the Tour de France, I guess.
Yes. The anti-Semitic history of the Tour de France, exactly. As well, we go a couple of years, and there's actually, an amazing story out of the Holocaust. I know there's so many amazing Holocaust, but Gino Bartali, I believe is his name, known as Gino the Pious, sort of after this, came and Ginetasio in Italy, won the Giro d'Italia a number of times and the Tour de France in 1938 and in 1948, with pausing to help in the war effort in Italy. However, while using his biking skills during the tournament, he was actually using his bike as a messenger to create and distribute fake papers to save Jews from deportation during World War II. Currently at Yad Vashem, one of the greatest cyclists of all time, multiple Tour de France winner. He sort of has his own tree in the Tree of Righteous Gentiles at Yad Vashem in Israel, as someone who was not Jewish, who saved Jews during the Holocaust. And he sort of had this resistance in order to rescue people. He was also, he hid a Jewish family in his house. And as we said, most importantly, he sort of used his bicycle. He was training for races, and he was a bike messenger put up by the government, but he would also carry messages to and from resistance members and Jewish people, bringing letters to them, stuff like that. So that's, probably, I would say it's not a Jewish athlete, but it's someone who truly cared for the struggle of the Jewish people, who was one of the greatest riders of all time, who has taken part of this, who has this amazing history of the Tour de France. And now we go, I guess it's 80 years later from that, Israel has its own national cycling team. And
that's very cool. We've been following them for a while. They're now the Israel Premier Tech, which is a Canadian tech company that's their sponsor. But it's owned by a couple Israeli guys or American Israeli guys, Ron Baron or Ron Baron, as I can only assume every Israeli calls him, sort of billionaire investor who owns the cycling team, and they put up a team at the Tour de France.
Absolutely. He something interesting about Ron Baron is he owns the single most expensive house in America.
Right.
Which was $100 million, palace in East Hampton. And I think if
good for him,
you have that kind of money, start a cycling team. Why the hell not?
I did want to mention that I do know one other great, actually French Jewish bicycling story, which is that there was a cartoonist named Hans Ray, who is Jewish, a German Jew who's living in Paris with his wife, Margaret. And shortly after the city fell, after the Nazis invaded, they fled Paris by bicycled all the way down to, I think, Portugal, where to Spain through Portugal, made it out through Lisbon and sailed to, I think, Brazil and then New York. One of the few possessions that they brought with them on their bicycle was the manuscript for a book called Curious George. And I know. And I think there's probably been some hagiography or whatever you want to call it about this. That's sort of some of the Curious George books have been inspired by their fleeing the Nazis and things like that. Which some of that sounds like a little bit too much like myth, but still pretty amazing that, they bicycled from France to Portugal, and we all benefit by their survival and having Curious George. So a good French bicycling story. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a terrific French-Jewish bicycling story.
The other thing I like about the Tour de France is that it just randomly involves other countries sometimes. Like this year it
Yep.
started in Bilbao, and like sometimes they just take a jaunt into Switzerland or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, that's just the route that we had this year. Like that country just happens to be there. Like we needed to bike through it, and it's like, it's not much of a national cycling like the whole idea
Yeah.
is supposed to be a Tour de France. Like
Totally. Well, it moves
I'm
over to
sure.
wherever it
Anyways,
fits.
yeah. I
So
just think that's really funny to start in Spain is great.
one other, Jewish bicycling story, not necessarily with Tour de France, but something we thought was interesting. The Tour de France is an incredible feat of endurance and, mental and physical strength. But 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2021, a 52-year-old Canadian woman named Leah Goldstein, who we've talked about on this podcast before,
Sure.
rode her bike across all of America, like the whole country, in 11 days, becoming the fastest woman ever to do that. So I believe we have either had Leah on the show before or talked about having her on the show. Maybe we couldn't get it together, but maybe she can come on and talk to us about the tour every week and then give us Israel Premier Tech updates. We'll see. I think that's it for Jewish cycling. Tell me, Jamie, have there been any sort of like in the last couple of weeks in sports of the major sports leagues, any sort of situations where they take all the rookies, like the players who are like new in the league, and then decide what teams they're going to play for? How does that work?
Glad you mentioned that because both the NHL and the NBA had their drafts, and two guys we wanted to highlight in each sport. One is the 40th pick in the NHL draft, Andrew Cristall, who's from Vancouver, I believe. He was selected by the Washington Capitals, so he'll have to join Danny Avdia as the sort of Jewish pillars of the MCI Center. I assume the Capitals play in the MCI. They don't call it the MCI Center anymore, do they? But whatever. The arena that hosts both the Capitals and the Washington Wizards will have Jewish players on both sides. So congrats to him. He was the first Jew picked in that draft. Should shout out the Twitter account Jewish Hockey, which does a great job sort of highlighting Jewish players. Give it a follow if you're interested in Jews and hockey. And in the roundball side, Amari Bailey was picked. Was it 40th overall as well? Let me
I think so.
Double check that. But he was picked by the Charlotte Hornets. He was the 41st pick overall. Sorry, in the second round by the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe not the most the most anticipated Charlotte Hornet draftee this year. But
interestingly, the second Jewish NBA player named Amar'e.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There have been two Jewish NBA players named Amar'e. He spells it Amari, as opposed to Amari Stoudemire, who's Amar''E. But the fact that there have been two guys in the entirety of the NBA history named Amar'e, and they're both Jews, pretty amazing.
Very amazing.
So yeah, and also, I mean, Amar'e, when he was a high school recruit a couple years ago, was in the news because his mom dated Drake. Or at least was spotted with Drake. So
yes,
potentially, a Jewish mother and Jewish, could have a Jewish stepdad as well. Hopefully, Drake shows up when he plays in Toronto and I don't know, chirps him from the bench or talks to him. I mean, it's always a little touchy in the NBA when moms come into play. That's happened a few times where there have been relations with players' moms or alleged relations with players' moms and.
Absolutely.
It never creates a lot of goodwill between them, let's say.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but that's exciting for Amari Bailey. He was a big high school prospect. I think probably 2 years ago, if you were doing a mock draft, like maybe he would have been a little higher than 40th, or 41st. But the draft analysis I read was that he was a steal and he was expected to be a back of the first round guy, and that it could be a good steal for Charlotte, a rebuilding team, and they'll see how he do. You should get minutes is the point. You should get minutes.
I think both of these guys are going to get a shot. Whether it's in training camp or the first sort of week or two of the season, both Bailey and Cristall are going to get a lot of playing time. A good look. They're drafted high enough, especially in Cristall's case, second round, 40th overall. Like a lot of those guys end up making the show. So, but they're going to get a good look.
Yeah, for sure. So we wish them both luck, and obviously it's summer, so I guess maybe we'll see Amari a little bit at Summer League. Keep an eye on him and see how he does. But yeah, anyways, I think that's pretty much it for this this round of Benchwarmers and going over all the news that's been going on, exciting stuff for Israel soccer especially. As always, we're produced by the Canadian Jewish News. You can find our podcast at the Canadian Jewish News website, the cjn.ca. Please like and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get us. If you're using a podcast app, you can just click subscribe. Get Benchwarmers into your feed whenever we publish. And follow us on Twitter for as long as that exists, and we're not too rate limited. And either of us are bored at work. You can get our read on Jewish sports events or on Twitter at Benchwarmers.
We follow it. We're in it all the time. And if you guys just want to talk about interesting Gino Bertali stories, he seems like a pretty cool dude with the cigarette and the slick back hair. Like, that's the kind of righteous amongst the Gentiles that I want to know.
Sounds good. Yeah. We're executive produced by Michael Freeman. But yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks guys.